Hello! Today we are going to talk about the stuff that makes up everything. We're going to explore the world of atoms. So, an atom has four major pieces. The nucleus is in the center. It contains the proton and the neutron, and the electron is on the outside. Let's talk a little more in depth about each of these pieces. The nucleus, as I said, is in the center. It contains the protons and the neutrons. The electron, the part that's not in the nucleus, has a negative charge. It has almost no mass, and it orbits the nucleus. The neutron has no charge. That's why it's called neutron. Sounds like neutral. It has mass, and it is inside the nucleus. The proton has a positive charge. It also has mass, and it's also inside the nucleus. So since the proton and the neutron are the only two parts of an atom that have mass, and they're both in the nucleus, that's why all of the mass, or most of the mass, of an atom is in the center, in the nucleus. So atoms make up everything. Carbon is a major part of our world. Anything that's alive or has ever been alive contains carbon. And we know, like carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, those are types of words that we use in daily life. Nitrogen is a main component of the air that we breathe. It's about 80%. Oxygen, of course, is essential for life, and it's also a major part of water. These are just a few examples of different types of atoms. So, atoms can join together and become molecules. A molecule is a group of atoms bonded together to make a new chemical compound. So in this picture we have the caffeine molecule, and you can see that there's several carbon atoms, some oxygen atoms, some nitrogen atoms, and a few other molecules that had already formed. As you see, molecules can join together with other molecules or atoms to make new molecules. So there were a few molecules like CH3 that can join in with nitrogen and carbon and oxygen and all those other things to make a new molecule. And in order for those atoms to join together, they have to bond. And one major way that they do that is by sharing electrons. So, as I said, a major way that atoms bond is by sharing electrons. You can see in the picture that the two atoms at the top are sharing two electrons. Or sometimes one atom will give an electron to another atom in order to bond with it. Both of these situations allow the atoms to basically stay very close together and kind of stuck together, and that's why we call it a bond. So, what makes an atom an atom? Why do we call it a carbon atom or a nitrogen atom? What makes it what it is? So, if atoms can share electrons without changing what they are, how do we know what they were to start with? So, an atom is defined by the number of protons that it has. The periodic table tells us how many protons each type of atom has. So here's our periodic table. It organizes the elements. Each element is made up of one type of atom with a certain number of protons. Let's look at an example. Okay, here we have boron. There's a lot of information on here, but really I want to look at three things. That capital B in the middle is the symbol, or the chemical symbol. It's the letter that's used to represent the element, so a B for boron makes sense. The number in the top left, or sometimes it's just directly above the letter, is the atomic number, which means the number of protons that is in that atom. And we also mentioned that these things have mass. So the mass is usually given in the top right. Sometimes they call it the relative atomic mass. And it's approximated by the sum of the protons and the neutrons. So if each proton and neutron weigh about 1 of this type of unit that we're measuring in, then we'd have 5 protons, we'd have the same number of neutrons, so 5 neutrons usually, and or it's close, not in every single atom, but it's close. And so if we add those together, we would get the mass of 10. Here's just another picture of a few different atoms that we had kind of talked about before. So there's carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and you can see there's C, N, and O, which we saw in a previous picture. You can see the carbon atomic number is is 6, nitrogen is 7, oxygen is 8, and that tells us how many protons are in that molecule, or that atom. So some common molecules when the atoms bond together, either with themselves or with other types of atoms, would be water, which is 2 hydrogens and an oxygen. Ammonia is 1 nitrogen and 3 hydrogens. Carbon dioxide means 2 oxygens and 1 carbon in the middle. And hydrogen peroxide, H2O2, is 2 hydrogens and 2 hydrogens on the outside and 2 oxygens in the middle. Here's a few other common molecules that you may have heard of. Laughing gas. Let's look at some other ones. Baking soda, chloroform, ethylene, as we talked about in our unit on plants. So these molecules get their names, as you could probably see before, just by counting how many of each type of atom it takes to make up the molecule. So if we have 2 hydrogen, it's H2, 1 atom of oxygen, just an O, we don't need a 1, and we get H2O for water. So that's our chemical formula. And here's just a few more examples of some things that we use sometimes, like glucose, C6H12O6, which we used when we talked about photosynthesis, butane, and octane.